Okay. Good evening and welcome to the September CAS meeting. We're having some technical difficulties over here that are getting straightened out, hopefully. We've got some things to go over before we actually get going here, and that has to do with the, do you have a report, Joe?
Yeah, a couple things.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. You want to go ahead and go with what you have there and announce the guests?
Joe, take the microphone.
I'll, come on over here. There we
Okay.
go, and I'll hold the microphone for you.
We've got a couple of guests here this evening. Sean, where's Sean? Sean, would you stand up and let us know a little bit about yourself, if you would?
That's a long story. Amateur radio operator, met Jason through amateur radio.
Okay.
Currently watching weather balloons and doing some weather balloon chasing, amongst other things. I've made one EME moon bounce on 1.2 gigahertz recently, so I've also worked 10 gigahertz and so on, so it's been a lot of fun in amateur radio. Television production has been my life. I've made my own hobby films, experimental type films for a while, on 8mm, Super 8mm, and 16mm for a couple of years. Worked for Ohio State Medical Department for a couple of years, did a video with them, worked at Channel 4 for 16 years as an engineer, and so on and so on.
Okay.
Semi-retired.
Great. And also Mike. Mike, would you introduce yourself?
Hi, Mike. I would say flew center. I followed Columbus Astronomical back in the 80s with Halley's Comet and just trying to get back into it. I put pieced together a rig. I've got a tripod, a Atlas mount, and I just got a 6-inch casting scope. So, trying to get advice and learn new skills.
All right.
Welcome.
Welcome. Anybody else? Just the guests, yeah, right? Well, these are some outreach things. Maybe those are not or not. This is the one that,
Try to do it real quick.
okay, that outreach event that you emailed me on for the school, that actually is at our next meeting night. It's October 14th from 5 to 8 p.m. So I don't know that we can do that unless there's someone here who would like to give up a meeting to do an outreach event in Marysville. Is there anybody who is interested in doing that? If not, I can tell her that we just don't. I told her after she gave me the date that this is our regular meeting night, and I'm not sure we can do it. So, but if anybody wants to give up their meeting night and do an outreach event in Marysville, let me know, and we'll get you in touch. So,
Is that?
yeah.
Okay. And I apologize, that's Joe Stark, he's our outreach coordinator. And let's see, Isaac, you have anything there? I do. You may want to move over this way.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Isaac Cruz. I'm the coordinator and lead for Columbus Astronomical Society Imaging SIG, CAS, CASIS. And we actually, for the past 3 weeks, actually, we've been actually going through providing a course on how to use one piece of software called PixInsight to be able to process the images that we all take, right? So in that respect, the course, in my mind, was a success. I mean, I think that some of the members that actually took it was actually enjoyed it very much. All the feedback that I gotten has been positive. So kind of like pretty neat to be able to do that. So one thing I want to do is we have one of the graduates of the course in here, which is Mr. Roy Grube. So Mr. Roy, come here, and I'll give you a, this is like when you graduate.
Way to go,
Wait till
Roy.
next year now.
So now you can ask him everything about PixInsight. He's the expert now. Well, thank you very much, Roy. I appreciate it, and great for, for the rest of the group that actually made it are not here, but it was actually very neat, very exciting, and we'll do it again. So I don't know when, but we'll actually get it to do it again, probably next year. And if you're interested in imaging and astrophotography, next Saturday at 1 o'clock, we'll have an open meeting for CASs. There is basically, we'll have an open agenda. So everyone is invited. You can come over here. It will be in this venue right here at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So again, if you want to attend the CAS's meeting, it will be here at Perkins Observatory, 1 p.m. in the afternoon. It'll be an open agenda, and basically questions about astro imaging and so forth will be answered. So if you're interested in that, awesome. Yes, sir.
You guys still go eat?
Yeah. I normally will send out an email about it on Wednesday, and we usually eat about 11, so we'll have like a kind of like brunch type deal, and yes.
Are those also like regular meetings each month, or are they kind of called as needed?
They actually are regular meetings each month, so yeah, we take a hiatus in the summer, so we just kind of finish the hiatus, and you're all invited to come over and learn about astroimaging. Thank you very much.
And if you come to enough of them, you get the certificate.
I know that's my incentive right now.
Thank you very much.
And again, I apologize. That was Isaac Cruz. He's a past president of CAS, and he is now our imaging group leader. Brad, do you have anything? Sure. This is Brad Haney. Brad is a past president also, and he is now the director of JGAP.
So I have two hats. The first hat is JGAP. Just one small request in here. I'm the one that told him about the microphone, and so I should speak right here.
Doing what I'm told.
JGAP is going to keep going. I am actually taking a vacation at the end of the month. I have not been on a vacation during the normal JGAP time for the last 5 years because I'm usually down there. But I did make arrangements to have George Eberts from Ohio University and Tom Burns actually take my place on the days that I won't be there. So during those 2 weekends, which are the last weekend in September and the first weekend in October, if you'd like to go volunteer and help them out, that would be most appreciated. So I won't be able to be there and egg you on and that kind of thing. Eric Hoffman and usually Wanda Schwally, if you guys know the folks down there, will also be there all those nights. So that would be most appreciated. On that note, since I'm leaving on the 25th, and that's about when I prepare the Prime Focus, our newsletter, if you have the opportunity to send me something, preferably in the next few days, maybe like by Wednesday or something like that, I would really appreciate it if you get some stuff to me early so I can actually prepare the newsletter, which is a time-consuming process, and then I can get the newsletter out before I leave, and that would be most appreciated. Those are the two things I have. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And next is Don Stevens. Don is the director of Perkins Observatory.
Hi, yes, I'm director, and I want to promote our programs that we do on Friday nights, and so you can put some of the skills you'll hopefully pick up here tonight to good use at those Friday night programs. We run them most Fridays, unless it's a holiday weekend, and those start at 8 p.m. Generally, we open doors around 7 o'clock, so volunteers usually show up between 7 and 8 and get set up. And we can have anywhere from 30 to 60 people at a program. And you don't need to be an expert, even after this. We often have experienced folks. We have experienced folks that often come out and set up their telescopes, and we pair people with more experienced folks. And you don't even have to have a telescope. We have telescopes that we can set out there for you to use. So please come out. It's usually a good time, and folks generally are appreciative afterwards, and that's about it. Right, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Don. Okay, and I believe that's all the announcements, and what we have next is our elections nominations chairman, and he has a report to give.
So it's that time of year again to elect new officers. We have 3 positions that are going to be vacant. Jim has served his 2 years, so we have a presidency vacancy. Don Leonard served 2 years also, so we have a vice president vacancy. And 2-year treasurer is also going to be vacant. So if we have any nominations, we do have 1 nomination for president. That was Charles Lesko. Is a nomination. And like I said, we also have a 4-year trustee that is going to be possibly open also. So there's possibly 4 vacancies there. If you have any nominations, you can let myself know. You can let any of the officers know if you have any nominations.
Okay,
Okay.
I'll do it.
All right.
Okay, thank you, Marshall. Now, the election is naturally very important, and if any of you might feel that you want to run for any office, even if there's another person nominated, you can still do it. Matter of fact, I'd like to see it. I think it'd be kind of fun to have a little competition. But is Alex here by chance?
Alex?
Yes.
Hi, sir.
Hopefully I can see you after the meeting's over. You stay, you go to the corner. No, I want to talk to you about a couple of things. Alex McCarthy, right? Yeah. Yes, okay. Okay, and I will turn this over to Don. You want to hold this? And
Sure, yeah.
I got a deltoid and it's killing me.
All right, well, Don Stevens teed me up perfectly. We have these opportunities for outreach both Friday here at Perkins Observatory as well as down at JGAP and really throughout Central Ohio. And as big of a ham as I am who enjoys being in front of people, and for somebody who's been doing astronomy for 2 years, I've felt very intimidated about setting up my telescope for strangers and pretending to know anything about the night sky, let alone tell them about it. And so selfishly, tonight's program is really for people like me who have some experience or interest in astronomy but think they might be able to do a better job sharing it with others. I have tried with friends and family. I usually put my wife and my sister to sleep, trying to get them excited. We were in Death Valley looking at Orion. I was sure this, if anything, would do it. And I think the stories we tell about the stars are as important as the stars themselves. And I fell dead flat telling stories about the stars. The image did not speak for itself, even on a perfectly dark sky. So I am thrilled to have this outreach boot camp. And I know that Roy is thrilled because he also apparently shares my uncertainties about jumping up in front of strangers and telling them about the night sky. So this program is for me, for Roy, and for anybody else who hasn't done outreach yet but may be interested in doing so. And for those of you who have done outreach, hopefully this will be a very fun conversational event where you can share your stories, maybe your war stories, but also your happy stories about somebody who came away seeing Saturn's rings for the first time or something like that and just changed their life. Tom Burns certainly gave an impassioned speech at our 75th anniversary back in September, talking about how his life was literally changed coming up to this observatory, being hauled off to the small little dome and being shown his universe, right? So I just think this is a super exciting part of astronomy that I haven't even touched myself yet. So I'm excited to do that. And we're going to kick off. Well, this is sort of our agenda. It's provisional because we're going to add some content here along the way. But we're going to start off with Charles talking about outreach logistics. We're going to then pivot to Brad, who's going to talk about building a small repertoire of deep sky objects, which is obviously very seasonal. Is that a laser? Yeah. Ooh, nice. Does it have sharks? Thanks, Brad. I appreciate the laugh there. Then we're going to move into Joe, who's going to tell us a little bit about introducing and modeling the solar system with your arms. And then we're going to move on to Isaac, who's going to tell us something about the constellations, some key factors like how to identify the North Star by using the Big Dipper. Jim's going to tell us about the moon. And then finally, Mohammed's going to walk us through some of the electronically assisted astronomy and astrophotography. This is sort of our warm-up act. And then basically, as our keynote, Don Stevens is going to fill in any gaps that we haven't covered here for basic bootcamp outreach logistics, and then share with us how he shares, especially on a cloudy night at the Perkins, how to guide newbies through the cosmos using some astronomy software called Stellarium. So we're going to be treated to some software technology as well. So that's our plan for the evening. We're going to kick off again with Charles telling us about general outreach logistics. Thank you, Charles. Are you recording the screen? I'm going to switch to it now. Okay. Who doesn't have these slides? Okay.
So, hello. My name is Charles Lusko. I'm one of the trustees with the club. And what we're trying to do is sort of, beginning training for people who want to help with outreach. We go out and go to schools, parks, different organizations, and try to introduce people to astronomy, people who haven't, done it before or are interested in it. You don't need a fancy telescope, an expensive one. You just need a little enthusiasm and basic preparation. So the idea is sort of get familiar with what's happening right now if you're going to be doing outreach. Like tonight, if it was clear, Saturn's going to be in the southern sky. That's an easy target to show people for the first time. The moon, of course, if it's not full, it's a good view. I mean, otherwise you got to have like a moon filter. But just some basic things like if you're going to show people, you want to get your equipment set up before you start to make sure everything's ready. You want to, if you've got a couple of scopes, you want to organize like 2 different lines, that sort of thing to keep people moving along and not have to wait in line too long. Just the basic ideas like that. You don't have to be an expert. Just being able to focus your telescope a little bit and answer a few basic questions. I started out with helping, just brought my old 60 millimeter telescope that I'd had since 1980 and, tried to upgrade it a little bit, but, showing people views of a few simple planets and things like that. So the idea is be organized. In other words, know what you're going to do and the few things that you're going to point out. If you've got a group of people, you're probably not going to be able to show them a lot of different things, just a few sharing. And a few basics like get it in focus first. If you don't have a tracking telescope, then you're going to have to keep readjusting your view periodically so that whatever you're looking at stays in the center of your field of vision. And you're going to have to guide people, like telling them they can't touch the telescope. They just have to look with their eye, not, because if they touch it, they're going to move it off whatever you're looking at. Things like that. Recheck your focus every now and then. But just the basics like that. That's all you have to do. You don't have to be an expert. You learn as you go. You just have to know a little bit more than the people that you're showing the telescope to. So anyway, that's it. Yes.
Just in addition to that, don't take your nice premium eyepieces if you have them.
Right. Right.
I have a set of like Ryan's Sirius Plossels that I take when I'm doing public programs, because you're going to have, especially children or young adults, They like to, you mean look in here, and they put a fingerprint right in the middle of your eyepiece. So that's one of my stories.
Right.
And it happened Sunday night, but, and I had my neighbors there.
Yeah.
But that wasn't my fault, but that's something I would recommend is have like a set of, low-cost eyepieces, if you have them, for those kinds of programs. And the telescope will move. One of the nice things, if you don't have a tracking telescope, you get this field of views all the time. You can cut in line and look at the object. I have to align it. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, a couple of things to add to what you said is very convenient to have a step stool.
Okay. Thank you.
Also for adults to lean on, with them.
Go ahead.
To have a step stool for kids this high, and then for the adults, so they don't have to lean on their telescope, they can lean on the step stool, and then have a small red light to show where they look.
Yeah.
Because they don't, everything from Dobsonian to refractor, it all varies. So,
Yeah.
and just a little thing, so you're looking here, you can lean here. and,
Right.
Just very practical things.
Okay, next.
I have a slightly different opinion than Jason, but so I actually I did buy a set of inexpensive eyepieces for outreach, but I end up using a rather expensive set of Pentax extra wide eyepieces. This was Brad's recommendation. The nice thing about them is they have a lot of eye relief, and so people actually don't put marks on my eyepieces because the cups are adjustable so that they actually don't mess up my eyepiece. I've been using it for a couple years and they're still pristine. Now I'm not gonna have to knock on wood, but so that's another option for the eyepieces. But yeah, I don't know. I would like to re-emphasize what Wilkie said. Having that ladder gives them, something to hold on to other than your telescope. So that's a
Okay. Okay. So one other thing that I didn't mention, and that is that when you are introducing people to astronomy for the first time and they're looking through your telescope, it's important to let them know that the image they see is not going to be like the pictures they see in the magazine. The colors aren't going to be as sharp or as brilliant, but it's still going to be amazing. It's just not going to look like a photograph that you can do with a camera and time release and stuff like that. So anyway, any other questions, statements? Okay, next.
Thank you so much, Charles. Here we go. All right, next up, Brad, building a repertoire of deep sky objects for the seasons.
So at JGAP, I get a lot of volunteers, which is really, I'm blessed to have a lot of enthusiastic people. But there are a number of people who don't have a lot of experience with observing the night sky. And they have a vague notion of some of the objects in the heavens and that kind of thing. And they really want to see those objects like they saw in the Hubble Space Telescope imagery and that kind of thing. And it is a good idea to remind them that those are not objects that you're going to see in the same exact way. But still, every once in a while, I'll get one of the newbies that comes up to me. I had someone about 2 months ago and asked, I really like that picture that I saw the other day in the JGAP webpage of the Elephant Trunk Nebula. I know it's here, and I'd like to point it out and show people. And for those of you who don't know the Elephant Trunk Nebula, it's a very, very faint nebula. It's actually fainter than the Horsehead Nebula in Orion. Extremely difficult to see. This is not a good public outreach program object. The objects that you need to use to explain the night sky for public outreach have to be bright, obvious, and have a good story. Those three characteristics. And as has been said already before, if Saturn's in the sky, that's what you're showing to people, because Saturn is the best object to show. The moon comes second. The moon is also very good. But so what I want to do is I want to take you through the seasons and just give you a few suggestions of some good objects and maybe give you a slight hint of the type of story that you can tell about them. I like to have a variety of objects in the night sky, but you don't need a lot of them. In fact, the entire summer at the John Glenn Astronomy Park is almost entirely M13, the Great Globular Cluster in Hercules, and the Ring Nebula in Lyra. Those two objects are 95% of what I show in the big scope, and there's a lot of really good stories that you can tell about those particular objects. You don't need a huge repertoire. So I'm going to go by the seasons. And for me, the observing season starts in spring with, that's when we actually open up the John Glenn Astronomy Park. And spring is galaxy season. Spring is actually the time when you're actually going to be looking out and telling the visitors how incredibly vast the universe is and how ancient the light is that you are seeing from these objects. The problem with galaxies, however, is they're not very bright. So if you want to see a galaxy from the lawn at Perkins, it's pretty challenging. You're limited to the number of objects that you can show. That said, there are two good galaxies that are pretty bright that can be seen fairly well at Perkins, and you can tell a good story for them. It's M81 and M82. Those are, they're relatively nearby. They're about 11 million light years away. They're spiral galaxies. You can talk about how they're edge on. You're seeing them, you're seeing round, flat, pancake-shaped galaxies from the side. That's why they look like lines instead of little blobs. And they're a really good object to show. If you happen to have a really clear night and the Big Dipper is straight up overhead, the Whirlpool galaxy can also be seen. However, my warning about the Whirlpool galaxy is that unless you have a pretty big scope, you're not really going to see a hint of the spiral structure here at Perkins. If you go down to J-Gap, if you have a big scope, you'll see it. But take into consideration how bright the objects are when you choose to show people objects. It's always good to have a few objects that do well when conditions aren't perfect. A really good type of celestial object that's not a planet to show people are double stars are really good. And in the springtime, the king of double stars is Mizar and Alcor. And you can actually tell the story about how Mizar and Alcor orbit around one another. You can point out Mizar and Alcor. It's the middle star in the handle of the Big Dipper. This would be Mizar, and that would be Alcor. What's really interesting about Mizar, the brighter one of the two, is that it itself is a double star. When you look at it in a telescope, you look at it with the naked eye, you can see Mizar and Alcor. When you look at Mizar itself, it blooms into two. But then you can go one step further. You can actually tell the story about how each one of these components in the Mizar system is itself two stars that you cannot see because the glare of the two stars are right next to each other. And so that's a really, really nice one. Then if you want to show, it's always just nice to show something that's very pretty for the sake of it, something that knocks their socks off just because it looks quite beautiful. And star clusters are a really good option for that. The star cluster, one of my favorites in the springtime is M35, which can be seen in a very small telescope. It works really well at low power, 30 or 40 power. And then the cool thing about M35 is it's got another star cluster right next to it that's 5 times further away. It's NGC 2158. There will be a quiz on this later. That's a really nice one. So you can actually see 2 star clusters in the same field and get an appreciation for depth. They're roughly the same actual size. They're roughly the same actual brightness. One of them is just a lot further away. So it's an interesting object to look at. Next would be the summer. The summer is when you're probably going to be doing most of your programs. And as I said, the two main objects are M13 and the ring. Story I like to tell, I like to actually talk about the history of the universe and the history of stars when I talk about M13. One of the cool things you can say about M13 is that it is probably the oldest object that you will ever see. And I usually like to joke that it's older than most of my laundry. So this object, we're talking 12 billion years. I mean, this was right after the Big Bang when this formed. This is, M13 is one of about 150 of these type of objects that are orbiting around our Milky Way galaxy. There's a bunch of other ones that are in view. This is just the best of them. Probably contains 500,000 stars or so, give or take. I don't know the exact figure. And a nice little fun thing to talk about is that it was the target of the Arecibo message back in 1973. They actually sent a little encoded message to M13, giving the code for DNA and the fact that human beings live on the third planet around this star and that kind of thing. And they sent it out. We won't get a response for that for another 50,000 years or so. If you have really good skies, you can look at some nebulous objects. M17 is a lovely star-forming region. It's just below the constellation Scutum. It's in the upper part of the constellation of Sagittarius, and it just looks really good in a medium-sized telescope. It's a big, reasonably bright nebula. If you have a good southern sky, that's a good one to look at. And then if you are in that neck of the woods, on the other side of Scutum is the wild duck cluster. So if M13 is, out of your reach or something like that, or there's clouds in that part of the sky, M11 is a good substitute. What's interesting about M11 is it's not a globular cluster. It's actually a different type of cluster called an open cluster, which has a lot of very bright stars in it, and it's very pretty and easy to see, and people go, wow, when they look at it, so it's pretty cool. M57, the story that I usually tell is that it's a dying star. It's basically the way that the universe recycles the material that stars make over the course of their lives back out into space, and that if you have oxygen inside of your body, that it probably went through this process at some point. We are literally made of star stuff, and the star stuff that we are made of, most of it probably went through the process of this. So the Ring Nebula is quite lovely. So moving on to fall. Fall is also the galaxy season as well, but you're looking out the opposite end of the Milky Way. The reason why spring is galaxy season is because you're looking perpendicular up and out of the Milky Way. Summer is the Milky Way season because you're looking along the plane of the Milky Way, it's high overhead, and then fall is you're looking over the other side. So there are two main galaxies that people look at in the fall, and those would be the other big members of our local group of galaxies. Number one is, of course, the Andromeda Galaxy, the most distant thing you can see with the human eye. Without a telescope. I like to point it out at the John Glenn Astronomy Park. It's a little fuzzy rice ball-shaped thing, and tell them that the light that they are looking at left from the Andromeda Galaxy 2.5 million years ago, and it's coming on its way to us. Imagine if it were cloudy. If you have very good skies, you can also look at another smaller galaxy that is part of our local group, the Triangulum Galaxy. That's M33. It's a little subtle. It's kind of hard to see the detail, but you can actually tell it's there from reasonably light-polluted skies. Under very dark skies, you can even see a little bit of the spiral structure. You can actually see that the spiral arms are making a little sigma shape in the sky. Moving on, there's a wonderful collection of globular clusters that are visible in the fall. I particularly like M15 because it is so unique. It actually is a really neat globular cluster. It's what's called a core collapse system. The globular cluster is actually collapsing at the core, becoming very bright And there is the center. It looks like a single star, but it's actually just a maelstrom of stars that are really, really close together. The story that I like to tell about M15 when I'm looking at it is that if you were on a planet around one of those stars in the center of that system, you could probably read by the starlight at night because they would be all so close together. It would be really interesting. And then this is the first object that is not a part of the Messier catalog. It got messed up on the thing there. It's NGC 7602. It's a little hard to find. It's in the constellation of Andromeda, and it too is like the Ring Nebula, and you can also tell the story about this being a dying star, expanding over the course of its life, and pushing the material that it made over the course of its life out into space. We are star stuff. Same story, different season. What's nice about some of these objects, a lot of them will appear in more than one season. You'll get them on one half of the sky in the beginning of the season, and the other half of the sky in the beginning of the next season. So some of them can actually overlap. You don't have to have a huge repertoire of objects. This one's a little tricky to find, but what's really cool about it is that most people in about an 8 to 12 inch telescope can see the green in this one. It's actually called the blue snowball. To me, it kind of looks like an aqua color. Some people describe it as green when I show it. It's a neat object because it actually has color to it, so that's why I like to show it. And then finally, the wintertime. We probably don't do as many programs in the wintertime successfully because of the clouds. But there are a number of really great objects to look at in the wintertime, and obviously the star of the show is the Orion Nebula. One of the things I like about the Orion Nebula is that it is bright. You can even see it when there's a little bit of haze in the sky, quite a bit of light pollution, and the center of it is still pretty visible. I've seen it from my backyard in Clintonville. You know, it's actually easy to see. The story you can tell about the Orion Nebula is that it is a stellar nursery. This is a place where new baby stars are being born. All of the stars that you see in the corner here are extremely young. They are, at oldest, a few 100,000 years old. So, I mean, that sounds like a lot for a human being, but for a star, that's just the blink of an eye. You can show people the Orion Nebula, and then you can move on to another couple star clusters, like the Pleiades or M37, and say that once the Orion Nebula has used up all its gas and dust, or the big bright stars in that cluster have blown that gas and dust away, then what you're left with are star clusters that are gravitationally bound together. So the Pleiades is a really good one. The nice thing about the Pleiades, it's visible to the naked eye. I like to have the kids try to count how many stars they see, and then tell them how many they ought to see. You know, some kids have said 9, you know, they're pretty amazing. Then I show it to them through a low power telescope. You can actually show it to them at like 20 power, and it fills the field of view, and you can see that even though you only see 6 with the naked eye, you can see 40 with a small telescope. And that shows kind of like what a telescope can do. Another star cluster that I like a lot, just because it's very pretty, is M37. This one is in the constellation of Auriga. It's a member of a group of 3 star clusters that form a little line in the constellation of Auriga. I think M37 is the prettiest one. And it's just another example of what happens when you have a stellar nursery that has used up all the gas and dust. It has a beautiful star that's superimposed on it. It's a nice little orange star in the middle, and it looks quite lovely. So pick objects that are good for the location that you're observing from. You're not going to want to see the Veil Nebula if you're in a city, you know. But if you're out in the country, you can see the Veil Nebula. You want to pick objects that tell a story. So each type of object you can have a general story for. I get a lot of people that ask me, "Oh, how far away is that?" Well, you know, a lot of times I'll say, "Well, it doesn't really matter. It's a couple hundred light years away or a couple thousand light years away." But for a few of them, I will actually look it up and remember how far away it is and that kind of thing. And then finally, make sure your audience is being wowed. If you want to show them something, give them something right off the bat that looks pretty. I usually like to start off with the really showpiece objects like M13 and then move on to the more subtle stuff later on as people kind of get used to looking through a telescope. And they will appreciate the subtle stuff if you tell them a good story about it. I mean, if there's a little fuzzball that doesn't look like much, but you tell them that that's 25 million light years away, that really tickles their brain, even though they're not seeing very much. So that's what I have to say, and we will go on.
Hey, Brad.
Yes.
One of the things I liked is Alberio. I'm surprised that you didn't mention that, but
I only had 4 objects for each
that's
one.
cool.
Okay.
So one of the neat things about Alberio is when they're looking at it, ask them what colors they think they are, because everyone's perception is different. I've heard people say, oh, that looks green, or that looks blue and yellow, or that looks a little more amber. At JGAP, we had several people from Michigan, so I had to tell them about the Michigan star.
Absolutely.
Because it's blue and yellow. Yeah, amazing blue, I know. But they seemed really to get a kick out of that. So I like you were saying that double stars are great if you have like it's hazy or there's smoke. So Alberio is another object that would probably be good.
One thing about M57, the ring nebula, I like to use too, and then besides the expanding out of it, is the fact that when you look at it in there, it looks like you're looking at a Fruit Loop. But in reality, the distance across the ring nebula is not millions or billions, but approximately 11 trillion miles, 1.7 to 1.8 light years.
So it's much
People
bigger.
really,
This little tiny object is much bigger. Another thing I like to do with the ring nebula that I really like is to ask kids what they think it looks like. Don't tell them what it's called. Don't tell them what it is. And then ask them what they think. And I get the greatest answers. A couple weeks ago, a kid said it looked like an avocado. And someone said it looks like they had just looked at Saturn, half an hour before, and now they're looking at this. They said it looks like Saturn with its rings without Saturn, which I like. And so you get a lot of really funny answers. I mean, Tom always told the story about the cosmic Fruit Loop, which is what one kid called it. I had kids call it the Cheerio or the powdered donut or that sort of thing. It's fun to kind of get them involved by giving their description. A lot of them will be real literal about it too. It's disappointing. They'll go, it looks like a little ring, and that's not as interesting. But if they give you an answer like, it's an egg, that's pretty cool.
Something else I like to bring up, and you don't even need a telescope for this, is when you look at Deneb and Vega. So Vega is much closer to us than Deneb, and I don't remember what, Vega is like 36 light years away or something. Deneb is like 300 light years away. And I go, Vega is obviously brighter, but Deneb is still pretty bright. It's not too far off. I said, but Deneb is even farther away. Mm-hmm. And that's when I talk about star luminosity. Yeah. And so I can kind of tell them that stars are different, that some stars give off more light, they're more luminous. Then I compare, it's like, say that you have a 100-watt light bulb sitting there about 10 feet away, then you have a 1,000-watt light bulb, maybe 100 yards away. They may look similar in brightness, but you'll see that it's farther away. So that's something else I like to do to kind of get them into understanding that stars have different wattages.
Yeah, that's a really good way. The word wattage is a really good way of putting it. I do the same thing, but what I like to do is have them guess which star is further away. Which of the three? Because Altair is actually a little dimmer than the 3 stars of the Summer Triangle: Deneb, Altair, and Vega. Vega is 28 light years. And Altair is 16 light years, but it's a little dimmer. So I have people guess which one they think is dimmer, and I lead them on. So which one is, And then, of course, I lead them into the wrong answer. And what's interesting is that they learn by getting the wrong answer that stars are actually different wattages. And I have not used that term, but I'm going to steal it now. So. Yeah.
One of the jokes I like to say, I said Vega, it's named after a car.
Yeah.
Brad, is M11
Yeah.
in south about M16 and 17?
M11 is north of M16 and 17.
Yeah, so I think this is the one that I was calling square cluster.
That's a good way to look at it. It is kind of square. They call it the wild duck, and what's really great about the story for the wild duck is that I can't see what people see in it that makes it a wild duck. Some people claim that there's like a V of no stars. I've never seen it. It doesn't make sense to me, but I think it's really memorable if you say that. You say, why do you think it's called the wild duck, and that kind of thing. So, Mark, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I have an alternate explanation for the Ring Nebula. I think it's the ghost of a squashed donut.
That's really good. Anybody else? Okay. Who's next?
I think Joe's next.
Joe Stark. So
if you
make
remember
sure you don't
nothing else,
rub
just
the-
leave your audience and try to get them to guess the wrong answer. I'm being nasty because he left out my favorite deep sky object, the double cluster. All right, introducing and modeling the solar system with your arms and otherwise.
Okay, well, I didn't know I was going to have to hold a microphone. It would be great if I could have a volunteer be a model for me. Anybody with, if you have to have strong arms. Anybody have strong arms? I'm not going to crucify you or anything, but if you had strong arms, you have to stretch out your arms like this. Okay? Anybody want to do that for me? All right, come on, Jason.
I have no pride.
Yeah. Okay. This is, of course, this is the solar system. Obviously not to any kind of a scale, but just to show all the different planets. Pluto and Earth is part of the Kuiper Belt, and then missing actually is the asteroid belt, which is between Mars and Jupiter. I didn't find a picture that had that in it. But anyway, the way I try to introduce this with like scouting groups or school groups is I say, the solar system is really more spread out than you think it is, okay? And they say, okay. And a way to picture it is by spreading out your arms. So Jason, would you spread out your arms, okay? So imagine that the tip of your middle finger is the sun, and the tip of your left hand is Pluto and Earth, okay? Now, I wonder what planet might be in the middle of the solar system. And I usually say it would be at the nose, okay? Because the nose is where about the middle of between the arms. Now, if they need a hint, I say, well, think in terms of your backside. What is below your waist at about the same place as your nose? And it is what?
Oh, no.
Uranus, that's right.
You say this to school kids?
I do. It always gets a chuckle.
I was like, it can't be that. It can't be
It always gets a chuckle, okay? Now, did I correct and say, yeah, of course, we don't pronounce it that way. I grew up pronouncing it Uranus all the time when I was in school, too. But it's obviously pronounced Uranus. But it's in the same place as your nose. And the way you can remember that, is that it's in the direct line of your anus. So now we know that Uranus, or Uranus, is in the middle of the universe, okay? Now, what's the next planet toward the, let's see, where are we going? This is the Kuiper Belt here. Kuiper Belt is here. The next planet toward the Kuiper Belt from Uranus is what? Neptune. They don't always get this, okay? So I have to kind of give them some coaching. But Neptune would be at the elbow, okay? So Jason's elbow between the nose and the Kuiper Belt, that is Neptune. Now, that's kind of interesting because that's kind of a long ways, okay? So we've got two planets that are really taking up a lot of space. And really, they're millions of miles apart. In fact, they're almost a couple of billion miles apart, okay? Now, if we go the other way toward the sun, the next planet closer to the sun is going to be what? From Uranus? Saturn. And Saturn is going to be, I can't see where your elbow is. You have a very indiscreet elbow. My elbow is easier to see.
Yeah, there you go.
But the elbow is where the next planet is, and the next planet is Saturn, okay? Now, halfway between the wrist and Saturn is going to be the next planet, and that, of course, is Jupiter, okay? So now we got Jupiter that's halfway between the wrist and the elbow, and we still have a whole bunch of planets that are left, but there's not much space. And that usually kind of blows them away. And then I suggested, now what is the next planet after Jupiter that comes in? And that is actually not true. There's something coming between Mars and Jupiter, the asteroid belt. And that is your wrist. Your wrist is the asteroid belt, okay? Now, this model is not accurate, obviously, but it gives a good idea for the scale of the solar system. So the asteroid belt is the wrist. The next object is going to be Mars, and that is the middle of his palm. And next to that is the Earth, which be the beginning of his digit of his finger. That's the Earth. And then Venus is the next digit, and Mercury is the last digit before you get to the sun, so that you fit the inner planets in the palm of your hand. Usually kind of, it blows kids away that this universe is so spread out from here on up, but the inner planets where we live, close to where we live, is really just a small distance. I have also done this with a piece of paper, and I'm not going to do that because it's basically the same thing. You can take a 5-foot strip of paper, and you can get like register tape, okay? And you just begin folding it. The first time you fold it in half, that's the nose, that'll be Uranus. Then you fold it both ways. And when you do that, you can have them write the name of each planet by each fold. But when you don't have a lot of stuff available, it's just neat to give them a model of the sources by just stretching out names. And just kind of coach them to which planet is next. And sometimes I have a picture up so they can tell, okay, that's next, okay? But that's the way we can model the solar system and give people an idea of how far spread out the planets are when you get past Mars. So, thank you for your assistance.
Yeah. Now I know what kind of tattoo I'm going to get next.
Brad, I am so glad we record these. That one is going to go down as probably our #1 YouTube video. And not just because of the incredibly factual content that we got there.
Yeah, if you can blur out my face, that would be great.
Yeah, we'll get on that. All right, Isaac. Come on down. Excellent. Can I help?
Put some of this stuff? No. All
right.
Just put it right here. All right. So.
Right arrow to go forward, of course.
Just gonna put this thing right here because I'll probably need both hands. Okay. So the goal, by the way, this was developed in the past 3 days, so you will excuse if this is really not something that is very, very, very well thought out. But the goal was to actually try to get a group of folks within our group to actually introduce astronomy, right? I mean, the sky and astronomical concepts to the public, for people that are basically not familiar with astronomy at all. So one of the things that I opened my mouth and I said, well, why don't we actually kind of think about, the constellations, right? I mean, things that actually have to do with no equipment. Basically, you only need your eyeball Mark I to actually see the constellations. And that is one way to actually begin to learn, what is on the sky. So that was kind of that was kind of the goal in there. And all right. So the first thing is that you, as I don't want to call it a teacher, but at least the person that is going to try to help the folks that don't know anything about it is, familiarize yourself with the sky. So you need to basically go out, in a clear night, maybe tonight, maybe at 10 o'clock, and just look up. Right? I mean, use your God-given eyes and look for obvious objects. Right? So what is it? What's the stuff that is up there? Once in a while, we actually have the moon. Right? We also have planets. In fact, the people may not know that they're planets, but you have to recognize and learn to recognize, the planets, where to find them, right, in the ecliptic, and we'll talk about what that is. And you can in almost everywhere, but maybe the middle of Fifth Avenue, look up and find some very bright stars, right? So concentrate on what you see, and just study it, just because this is what the folks are going to be looking at when you actually talk about the sky, right? Well, another thing, of course, is once you see that, see if you recognize something, right? I mean, look for patterns. A survival trait of humanity is actually this business of the tendency to actually see patterns when there is some, when there is none, right? I mean, when there's actually no patterns whatsoever. Basically, the human brain actually tries to make up sense of what it's chaos and creates these patterns in our heads. But it was called apophenia. So it does have a name, right? But the neat thing is that it allows us to actually look at the sky and start basically segmenting, right? Putting the sky in different boxes, if you will, right? And so one of the first things you want to do is actually kind of like be familiar, get yourself familiar with those, with those patterns, right? Which we call constellations, and the ones that are not, constellations, we call them asterisms. So the neat thing about this is that you're beginning to, create a vocabulary, right? I mean, you begin to actually learn and be able to explain what people actually see. It's up there. So, in order for you to do that, there has to be some context, right? So this is where my thing about some of the props that I actually brought in. First of all, one of the best things that you can actually get is a book like this. This is called Star Watch. I don't know if you have actually ever seen it, but this is like the first book that I actually recommend for anyone that wants to actually learn about astronomy to actually get. It's very simple and it's kind of neat. Basically, it goes across by season, right? Remember, Brad actually talked about the seasons and the things that are in the sky and so forth. And it actually goes by season and by time. So it says, hey, you know, in January around midnight, you will actually be able to see or find, you know, like Gemini, right? I mean, Gemini, you look up, and that's, you know, that's it. It gives you the shape of the constellation, right? I mean, it shows you what it is. And like we said before, one of the things that is important is to, you know, give a story, right? I mean, to actually not only say, hey, you know, you see those 6 stars in there, right? You see them right there and so forth. Well, you know, tell about the story, right? I mean, Gemini, you know, those are the twins and where they come from and so on and so forth. And this actually gives you a little bit of that, right? Doesn't give you the whole story, but it gives you a story, which is basically what we're looking for. So, you know, we talked about, we talk about Lyra, right? I mean, he actually mentioned Lyra. So, you know, it tells you where to find it, what it looks like, and it gives you a context on the things that you want to actually teach, to the folks. Mention Andromeda, you know, that's what it looks like, right? I mean, that shape, that pattern is in the sky. Now, not everybody will actually see it, so it is important to actually have, right? I mean, some other, you know, tools, right? One of the tools is, you know, a good. This is not a toy. This is actually a tool, right? I mean, this is a very bright, right, laser pointer. And a good laser pointer will actually give you a beam of light that actually you can actually see, and the folks that are around you will be able to find specific stars that actually, form the constellations themselves. And, you know, you don't need to know all the constellations, okay? There's only like 3 or 4 that are in the sky during the seasons that are basically obvious. So if you learn those and a little story that is around them, and you can point to the major stars, the bright stars on them, you're golden. That's basically, you know, have a group of people that never basically had any kind of exposure to astronomy, and you can, you know, teach them something, get them started into, into the hobby. And again, for you, the tools are, you know, very simple. For them, they only need the eyeball Mark I, right? I mean, they're just their eyeballs to actually look up. One thing that I'm going to tell you is that this is not a good tool, okay? When you actually are trying to teach, you know, people, you know, the constellations and what's on the sky, well, you turn this on, and the little dark adaptation that you've had, right? I mean, that you have your group around you and everything else, and it's dark and it's very nice and so forth, and you know everybody's dark adapted, and you go, well, let me show you something. That's it. You know, you've lost 45 minutes of dark adaptation. It takes 45 minutes to actually go back to where you were once you are completely dark adapted. So this is good to use at home. If you want to plan ahead and you want to see what's in the sky, and you say, oh, okay, well, this is the stuff that is in the sky today. Don't use this to actually teach, you know, the public. This is not a good tool, right? So thank you.
Teach them a very bad habit, because you want to discourage folks from using cell phones around telescopes.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly right. The best tool that you can have is of course when it works. You know, your red flashlight. Why is red? So basically it doesn't destroy your dark adaptation. So you can look at things, you know, like this, and basically, you know, pointing them out and so forth. So you can use that. Well, now this is a book, right? I mean, it's made out of paper and everything else. And one thing that happens when you are teaching folks is that, you know, it's dark, it's cold, dew occurs. It destroys books. This is my second book, and it's already in bad shape. But so it actually, you need something that will withstand the dew, right? So when you actually need to find where things are and so forth. Planispheres. Anybody have seen this before? This is a fantastic tool. This guy right here. I brought 3 classes of planisphere, okay? And I'll just one after another, right? So this is kind of a very, very simple one. It has basically the looking toward the north, and this one is kind of neat. It has actually the southern sky, exposure as well. And 100%, this is kind of my favorite one. It shows you, first of all these planispheres have the same method of working. You put here your date and the time, and it shows you the sky. That's basically all that it does. And, with your red light, you can basically say, oh, okay, you can cheat. Because you basically go, oh, okay, that's Gemini right there. I mean, so it actually it's actually pretty cool to actually have that.
That's your Chevy GM type.
Yes, generic planisphere. But if you're starting, if you want to do outreach and you're starting, this is great because only the brightest stars are in this one. It's kind of small, so by definition, they can't put a lot of stuff in here. So only the brightest stars. This is, again, if you're starting, get one of these. They're like $15 in Amazon, so it's like, fantastic. Once you have this and you want to be a little bit more, maybe a little bit more constellations and more stars and so forth, and actually even some, these actually also have, like big galaxies, things like that. Of course, Andromeda is here and so forth. The Miller planisphere. This is actually an excellent planisphere as well. It's very easy to do. Again, you look for the date, you put the time in there, and then that's kind of the North Star. You go like this. Oh, everything is aligned for you. As easy as that, okay? But this has more information in it, so, to find things quickly, like I said, to cheat and whatever, this is a little bit harder, but it gives you a little bit more information. Finally, if you want to impress your friends and neighbors.
Luxury. One thing about the planispheres, though, is they do not account for daylight saving. So you have to adjust an hour during daylight savings time.
Except for this one, have the daylight saving time. But anyway, this is the Mercedes-Benz of planisphere. You know what is interesting about this? It has so much information. It's very, very hard to actually find nearly anything in here. It's literally like looking at the sky. Will Turian, which is the fellow that actually make beautiful, beautiful catalogs and illustrations of the sky, actually made this. And again, this is fantastic. I mean, I use it at home. I mean, it really has a ton of information and everything else.
And it's not meant to be used in the field.
Yeah.
So you just sit around home on a cloudy night.
It's beautiful.
And you can figure out sunrise and sunset times.
Oh, yeah. It has even the analemma, so you're gonna. That's how you figure out your sunset and sunrise. With this thing, it's really fantastic. But it's more for your own use. But it is impressive, right? I mean, it's like, hey.
Hey, Isaac, I don't know if they actually make that one anymore. The one with the cursor in it and everything.
They don't what? Oh, that they don't make it?
It's out of print, yeah.
Oh.
I think you can still pick it up used, like on Amazon or something.
Yeah, and if you do find it, it's very expensive.
They're very expensive.
It's
Yeah.
like the William Star Atlas kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's.
I think I saw one for $600.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe I should treat. I should treat.
Anybody want to buy it?
Anybody wants.
Well, I'm not selling mine ever.
One or two around the observatory.
If you can find them, right? Okay, so I'm running out of time, but another thing is, again, I talked about the dew. This is Deep Map 600. This is actually a very nice, this has the most popular 600 objects and so forth. So if you actually get into a point where you can actually want to, go to the sky and show things to people, you can actually put that in a table, and it's not ruined because it's basically made out of plastic, okay? And it's great. It has not only a map of the sky for every, these are the dates right here on the top, so you basically have the, where things are based on your month. But it also has like an ungodly list of deep sky objects and things like that you can basically, talk about and where they are and some stories. I mean, just very, very, very small stories. But again, another tool for those that are going to, be doing some of the outreach. Yeah. Oh, there is a moon map. Yes.
And you don't know what the name of the feature is, those are great to point out features and stuff.
That is true. So, and finally, everything that I have talked to you, that I have said, you don't need any instrumentation whatsoever, right? I mean, you don't need a telescope. You don't even need binoculars. However, the question that you're always going to get is, I want to buy a telescope. What should be my first telescope? And the answer is binoculars. Okay, start with binoculars. Don't buy a telescope yet. Just take it easy. Calm down. Get a good pair of binoculars and have some fun with them and learn how to use them. And this book is called Turn Left at Orion. This book, also dog-eared and probably full of dew. It actually is kind of neat. It shows you how things look like through the eyepiece. So this is not, your it's not your astrophotography that you actually see in many of the books and illustrations and so on and so forth. This actually, it actually shows you not only where the things are, but what the things look like truly on your eyepiece, right? So this is actually excellent for making that when people say, well, what should I expect to see with my binoculars or a small telescope? That's what you look like. That's what this thing looked like. It says where it's at, a little bit of the story, what it looks in the telescope, and so forth. So good reference again for that story to hook people up. All right. Well, with that, I'm done with my props. Hopefully, you'll be able to use that as some insights to help out other people get started. And I'll take my $600.
I think one really important feature of this is not only is it something I'll never get down and see, but it's something that can be profoundly useful to a person. Like, as I said, if you ever find yourself lost, always knowing where north is. That being said, I will say, and I've said this before, the darkest sky location I have ever been to, I forgot, is Big Bend National Park down on the Texas-Mexico border. I grew up in Alaska. This is our state flag, so I know that asterism pretty well. I couldn't find the Big Dipper to save my life because the sky was so dark, the stars were so bright that even these stars kind of washed out into the background. So if you guys ever have a chance to get down to that part of Texas, I can't recommend it highly enough. All right, next up, our President Jim. Fly us to the moon, Jim. I couldn't resist.
Brad, did you bring your keyboard? Or you got a keyboard here? Keyboard? Yeah. Oh, fly me to the moon. I was gonna sing it, but we didn't bring the keyboard. Okay. Oh, you got the, there it is, right there. So it's a left and right key. I got to bounce back and forth.
Yeah, the arrow keys are right.
The arrow, right, okay. Okay, pardon?
Lights off or on, like this.
Yeah, off would be good, off would be fine. Okay, what we got up here is a couple pictures of the moon. And what you'll find out is when you do the outreach programs, people are very interested in looking at the moon. And there's a lot there to look at, okay? So what you've got up here right now, this is the near side of the moon, which we normally see whenever we look at the moon, okay? This is the far side of the moon. Far side, back side, dark side, a lot of names for it. But I wouldn't worry too much about showing this because I just wouldn't worry about it, okay? Now, I know you're not supposed to do this, but I did it anyway. I listed everything there. The distance from the Earth to the moon is 238,000 to 240,000 miles, which works out, and I've got a demonstration I can do later if we have time, works out to 30 Earth diameters. When it's a supermoon, it's approximately 28 Earth diameters. When it's what you would call, a mini-moon, it's approximately 32 Earth diameters from the moon to the Earth, okay? The orbit around the Earth is 29.53 days. That's not really completely true. From where it starts in relationship to the Earth to when it goes around to that same point again is actually 27.53 days, okay? But you have to remember, as it's going around the Earth, we are moving along ourselves around the sun. So in order to keep that same relationship, as far as the phases and that, it has to go through 29.53 days to end up back at a new moon again, okay? And round it off to 30 days, 1 month. The age is 4.5 billion years. Earth is also considered 4.5 billion years, but it is definitely older than the moon. And if you go by the theories as to how the moon was basically got there, the most accepted theory is we were struck by another planet at the time. And when we were struck by that planet, Theia, part of it was ripped out and formed the moon, part of the Earth and part of Theia. Now, the interesting thing, and I just read this a few days ago, there are two young college students. I'm not really sure where they were at, but they're doing some research. And they believe there are two very large areas in our crust that when they put have seismic action go through there, it slows down considerably, and nothing else slows it down like these two objects. And what they believe it is part of Theia's crust embedded in the Earth. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. You know, these are just things that you can bring up to people or whatever, okay? We never see the back side of the far side, dark side, because of what we call synchronous rotation or tidal lock, okay? And what that actually means is as the moon goes around the Earth, it makes one revolution as it goes around, or actually one rotation as it goes around, okay? And if we have time there again, I have two people that are going to help me, and we can do a demonstration as to, and you can see in the action as to why we never see the backside of the moon, Okay, this is a demonstration you can do for kids or anytime, maybe if you're waiting for the sun to go, or the sun to go down and that. Now, as far as the distance from the Earth to the moon, you can fit all the planets between the Earth and the moon except for Mercury. Okay? And that's an example of it right there. But I think there's some space. I think if you scooch them together, you could probably get Mercury in there, but they claim not. Okay? But as it's shown, I'm sure they added up all the diameters. Well, no, it's Mars. Yes, yeah. I think they're both red. Yeah, okay. Now, if we go back here, okay, these dark areas that you see are called Mare. And the meaning of that is actually C, because I don't know when they decided that it wasn't, obviously when they got better telescopes or whatever, but at one time, all these dark marks were thought to be actually seas, as what we have here on Earth. And what they actually are is lava flows, very ancient lava flows. And something interesting, when you do look at the backside, which you're not going to be doing, but when you do get a chance to see the backside, what you find out is if you notice, there are very, very few there, okay? And what they think, some of the reasons for this is because at the time that, and this kind of helps with the theory, at the time that the Earth was struck by Theia, it was still molten. It wasn't really solid, as it hadn't really cooled enough. And when Theia struck it, it ripped off parts of it, which came back together, was, I believe, coalesced, and formed the moon. Well, since the moon only shows one side to the Earth, and the Earth being very hot, it kept that side that we now call the near side from forming up and getting cool as the backside, is the theory, okay? And the backside is much, much thicker as far as the crust of it. The front side is more around 5 meters of reguli on it, to where the backside has approximately 15 meters of reguli on it, okay? But the actual crust is much thicker on the backside. And that's also why they think that there might be fewer, not necessarily fewer, but fewer large craters on the backside. The largest crater on the moon, as far as the near side of the moon, is called Bailey. And that's approximately 825 feet in diameter. And its walls are approximately 13,000 feet. I'm sorry, 185 miles. And then 13,000 feet high are the walls of it, okay? And then the largest crater on the moon, period, is the South Pole Aitken, which is 1,600 miles wide and 3.9 to 5.1 miles deep, and is 4.2 to 4.3 billion years old. So it was made not too long after the moon was formed, okay? Most of the craters on the near side range in 0.6 to 60-mile range. And according to the International Astronomical Union, there are 9,137 craters on the moon that they recognize as craters. Not all of them have been measured, though. Only something like less than 2,000 have been measured. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Now, if you're going to be showing the moon, and I'm not saying run out and get one of these or anything, or make one of these, but it is very handy to have one of two things or whatever. This here, and this is a very, I don't even know where this came from. I wouldn't give this to my worst enemy. It doesn't even want to thread into anything that I have. But this is supposedly a 1 1/4 inch moon filter. Now, this is not anywhere near that, but most of your better moon filters are, they're 13, what they call 13% filter. Okay, they allow 13% of the light through. When it's a full moon, and there again, if we have time later, I can show you why looking at the moon, when it's a full moon, it's not really the best time to do it as far as if you really want to see detail, because you don't get the shadows and you don't get the depth perception that you would when it's not as bright. Okay, and the best time is usually like about quarter moon, anywhere crescent to quarter, and you can see some there's a lot there to look at, believe me. The other thing, now I made this for my 6-inch scope, which happens to have an 8-inch tube, but it's just a disc with a hole in it, and I put another circle on the front, so I can put it on there, and what it actually is I remembered an aperture reducer. And what it's basically doing is reducing, it doesn't reduce the image, but it reduces the amount of light that's coming into the scope. Even though I have a 6-inch scope, it's still cutting down that amount of light that's coming in, but it's still falling on a 6-inch mirror. Okay? So all I do is go out there and I can set it, well, do it that way, set it like that, or turn it around and reduce it down till it's easier to look at. Because when it's a full moon and it's really bright out, I have looked at the moon and got up the next morning and did see spots. It won't blind you or anything, but it's for a couple hours, yeah, it was not real fun. But one thing I did notice, though, as I went down, the holes actually are getting a little bit too small, and it does kind of cause some weird things under certain conditions to where things just don't look quite right.
Diffraction, which actually reduces the sharpness of the view. So this is better if you're doing like the whole moon at the same time, because you won't notice the diffraction if you're looking at the entire moon. But the tiniest little hole, if you're looking at really high power, the wave nature of light will prohibit that little tiny hole from producing a really sharp image.
Okay.
So you won't be able to get it sharp when you're at high power.
Plus,
doing it low power, you won't know.
yeah, plus when you're using the higher power, you're actually reducing the light to start with a bit. So, but those are two things, not two things, but either one or the other that you might want to have. And naturally, if you have a refractor, you would probably want to use the screw-in type filter, 1 1/4 or 2-inch, whatever happens to be that you have. Okay. I've got one more slide here. And this slide, I want to thank Mark Peter for this, because I had heard of this, but I had never seen it. And we were out there one night, and it was a night to where there weren't a whole lot of guests, but a phenomenon was going on that I had never really seen, just heard, and that was Lunar X. Okay, I had never seen that before. And I missed something, but that's okay. I'll come back to it. Lunar X, okay? All right, if you take a look at it, don't look at this right away, but how do you not, you know? This is not blown up at all over here as far as the image was originally taken. This is the image as it was taken, okay? And it's pretty wild to look at it that you do. It's like somebody went out there with a can of paint and painted a white X on the moon. And it's always at the terminator, and then as you look over here, a little closer, you start to see to where it's really just the edge of this crater here and the edge of the next crater. And you can look it up on the internet that they do have schedules that you can look at as to when, what day and what times that you'll be able to see it. And the particular one that I watched out there, it lasted, I had it on and off for about 2-3 hours. How long it really will continue to go, I really don't know, but it's really wild to see. And like I say, thank you, Mark, for showing that to me. Let me go back to that slide there that out of the 5, I happened to miss. When looking at the moon through a telescope, many people think that what looks like an object in the center of a crater, they may think is actually the object that made the crater, and it is not. What that actually is, and it seems to be a little bit like the medium-sized craters. You look on some of them, you'll see something right in the middle of them. Okay, and what it is where the meteor hit, and it hits so hard, it's just like water, a drop of water. It goes down, and then it splashes back. And that's exactly what's happening there. Water would splash back. That would give you your rim there that you have. And in the center is where the water splashes back. But in this case, it's the reguli that's rebounding back, and it's called a rebound mark. Okay? And at quite high magnification, if you look at some of the larger craters, you'll see large rocks or boulders down in the crater. And a lot of people think, well, that's where it hit and it broke all up. Well, that's not what's happened, because usually that's pulverized. And that's one reason there's reguli there instead of soil as we might know it. And is a lot of it's volcanic, that has been, the volcanic ash that, or flow that's in, that we call Mara, has been hit so many times by meteors and just pulverized it that the whole moon is actually covered by that. And that actually goes anywhere from 5 meters to 11 meters thick of that ash or that powder there. That can be, I imagine breathing it wouldn't be too good because it's very, almost like glass. And they did have trouble with the astronauts doing damage to their spacesuits and that, so it could be a real problem. But the rocks that you will see down in a crater are not any part of what struck it. It is just simply where everything went up on a rim, and then it's just boulders to one action or another. There are such a thing as moonquakes that might have happened, and they actually got loosened and just fell back into the crater. That's all you're seeing. Okay. And like I say, unless we have time for the demonstrations a little bit later, that's all I've got. No, I'm taking it home. Oh, yeah, they're quite large. Yeah, yeah.
So our penultimate speaker, Mohammed, is going to be teaching us about how we can use the camera to see further into the cosmos. And he and then Don Stevens are going to show us how using software can also accentuate this experience in the outreach context. So without further ado, here's Mohammed.
Thank you.
Cheers, man. Just the right arrow there to go forward.
Do you have the laser pointer?
Should
There it is. There it is. Okay. Well, yeah, please. Thank you. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about electronically assisted astronomy and astrophotography, or EAA and AP, as they say. I start with a very common definition. Where, well, I searched online, I found a few definitions. This one was kind of the best. So they say EAA is a simple form of astrophotography that people use a camera for a real-time observation of faint objects. Well, I have made this red, the faint word. So it's not like it's for the faint objects all the time. As Jim was talking about, the full moon that is so bright, if you look through the eyepiece, it blinds you literally for a few seconds. So in such cases, it's actually reversed. So for example, on moon, you can reduce the exposure of the camera. If you have a dedicated camera like this, you can reduce the exposure to 1 millisecond, for example, and see it way better than what you see in the eyepiece with your eyes. So why people do EAA? There could be a lot of reasons. So as this says, this definition, faint objects is probably the most common one. So we have a limited number of stuff that we can see in the sky, objects, because they are faint normally. So this will help us to see more if you use a camera. Sometimes we want to see more details on an object. This is another reason the camera is pretty sensitive. It provides more details. Light pollution could be another factor. We can have, for example, for a camera, put a filter there, and it helps a lot. Again, faint objects. We can also take an image with some cameras like this, for example, or we can simply put our cell phone in front of the screen and take an image of the screen. So this has happened to me while I was doing imaging. People were taking image of my screen. Yeah, so,
Laptop photography.
yeah. And also, there are some dedicated screens and cameras like this one. I think this is the Revolution Imager version 2. So you can use this for public. So you can simply connect the camera to the scope and show it on a screen. So this way they don't touch your expensive eyepiece some of you were worried about. And how it's done is actually pretty easy. You just put a camera in the instead of the eyepiece at the focal plane of your telescope. Some people have used webcam. I think a long time ago when I was reading about this stuff, like 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, people were using webcams. So there were not such dedicated cameras on those times. You can use cell phone, DSLR, or this type of camera. So this is a camera from ZWO website. They could be pretty fast, like hundreds of frames per second. 100 is pretty easy to do with these cameras. And as I said, this is Revolutionary Imager. And that one was interesting. I saw this on Amazon. It's for $50. It's a screen. You put it in the eyepiece place. So yeah, here is what I found online that people have used. So it's like, I think this one was from a Revolutionary Imager. The same thing, a galaxy on the screen. it can be used for deep skies also. Some of them are pretty bright, like M42. You can use it for other stuff, for moon, for deep sky, M16, M20, and globular clusters, moon. And those two that you see on the right, those are my videos of one night at JGAP. So I was trying to do a planetary imaging of Saturn, Jupiter, and Moon. So that was about the EAA. Briefly, but we have also astrophotography as well. So it looks like astrophotography is a broader definition. It's almost includes all types of imaging at night probably, because it's like there are new cameras that you can use them for imaging even at daylight. So there are some cameras like the one that I showed you here from ZWO. Yeah, this one. So for example, ASI 462 is pretty sensitive to IR, so you can use it in daylight. You can put a filter to block the visible light and allow the IR to come in and image planets in the daylight. By the way, again, another definition that I found online from space.com, they say astrophotography is imaging of the celestial objects and capture as much as light that you can while minimizing star movement. And I still think this is not very accurate. If this is astrophotography as well, some people are interested to have star trail in the pictures, in the images that they take. So it's way broader. So it includes all these types of imaging, EAA, planetary, deep sky, star trail, nightscape imaging like this that, well, I have done these two at JGAB with my cell phone. And this is probably from 15 years ago. I did this with a DSLR. So what is the difference between astrophotography and EAA? It looks like EAA should be for near real time. So you don't do long exposure, you don't do calibrations, or you don't take darks and other stuff, you don't do guiding. It's pretty simple. You keep it simple, it should be near real time. But astrophotography, it could be EAA and much more. So you can do long exposure, you can do guiding, you can take calibration, calibrating frames, you can do stacking later, post-processing, and many other stuff. And this is a telescope and the mount that I had a few years ago in Florida. CM60, this is TS130 apochromatic telescope, a ZWO camera connected to a laptop. And finally, for astrophotography, I think two most common types of imaging that people do are deep sky and planetary. So for deep sky, people can use one-shot color camera or DSLRs and mono camera. For both of them, there are different filter types that you can use. For color camera, for example, they have specific filters for deep sky objects or for galaxies. The same thing for one-shot color camera, for mono camera. For mono camera, you can do LRGB or narrowband, and for deep sky, you can do multiple hours of imaging. I have seen images, I think the longest one that I saw was probably 150 hours of imaging on one object. And you take calibration frames, do a lot of post-processing. People use different software or a combination of some of them. And this is one example of an image that I have taken, Rosette with my HSD11 and Hyperstar. And another one is planetary imaging. Unlike this one, you don't do long exposure. Again, you can use one-shot color camera or mono camera, you can use filter again the same way that you use it here. But on this one, you're going to use a very long focal length. And a rule of thumb is like 5 times of pixel scale for your F ratio. And here, the point is you have a very long focal length. And you want to do something that is called lucky imaging. So you do very short exposure, like 100 frames per second, or even more if you can. For example, on moon, 1 millisecond is probably enough with a normal gain of one of those cameras that I showed you. 1 millisecond means 1,000 frames per second, but probably the camera with a USB 3 connection can make 100 frames per second. So ASI 462 does, I think, 130 something, 136 frames per second. This is the fastest one I see online with a normal price, a few hundred, 100 or 200s. So again, you can do post-processing in different softwares, PI, PP, AutoStacker, and similar stuff. And these are some examples of images that I have taken: Jupiter, Saturn, and I think this one is Uranus and Moon, and one of these craters at a closer look.
Perkins.
Yeah.
It's Archimedes.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, it's real nice.
Any question?
So, one thing is that from the perspective of the outreach, right, the EAA type of astronomy, of work, that definitely can be used for sharing work, sharing
Yes.
what you're doing with the public, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that seems to be kind of the most easier one.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, the EAA seems to be.
that's pretty useful. Yeah.
It's pretty useful for that. Now, of course, astrophotography is, the results. You can
Yes.
share it as well, but it's the results of
Yeah.
the actual, what you've done.
Well, it's really hard to find a good definition.
Yeah.
So it's
You have found, and I'm sure this is something you're used to, is that even if you're doing really high-end imaging, which is not something that you would be doing during an outreach program, that people will come up to you and ask you what you're doing and want to look at your screen, and then you just talk about what you're doing while you're doing it. So you can do real nice astrophotography and then also do public outreach at the same time, because you've got something on your screen that's coming into, it's, developing itself as they watch, and that's really interesting. So
yeah, exactly.
Something I wanted to mention, I don't know if you mentioned it, but I was getting coffee. So they now have EAA devices, and I brought one tonight, so if it's clear, I'll show you guys how it works. Brought it to the picnic. There's one from ZWO called the C-Star, which just came out. Another one called Dwarf 2 from Dwarf Labs. Did you mention this already?
No.
Okay, cool. So anyways, I think they're very, I have the Dwarf Labs. One of the interesting things about it is a gateway drug into astroimaging, because the results that you get are FITS format, and also you get the darks, and you can post-process, like I post-process them in PixInsight. So the Dwarf 2 is one of them, the C-Star, which is just starting to come out. They interface with your phone, and they do all the plate solving and stuff, and it just sets everything up. And what you all know, I was showing M13, and I'm like, holy crap, this thing looks great. I mean, for something that's, it's little. It's about that big. It's very portable. You can take it on a plane. But I remember people were like, man, that must cost a lot. I'm like, no, it's about $500. And it's a great outreach tool, I think. And it also allows you, if you want to get more into the astrophotography, you can learn the same post-processing skills as you would with a big rig with these smaller ones. So if it's clear, I'll set it up tonight and show you guys how it works. For the price.
One of our volunteers comes out here, not affiliated with the club. He has a little, essentially it's a robotic telescope. He just plops it down and it takes images.
Yes,
All the processing everything.
I wanted to talk about that one. Yeah, there was a student here that he has something small. He just put it on the ground. It starts working and taking images. Yeah. So that's interesting. Well, I think I talked about this too. I have a cell phone that does probably the same thing. So it does 10 minutes exposure. You just put it somewhere, it takes the image. I think the way that it works is they have figured out what is the maximum exposure that you don't see star trail. Probably it's 20 seconds, 30 seconds. So I'm guessing it does stacking of 10 minutes. So in 10 minutes probably it takes 30 images and stacks them. Because 10 minutes is too much to not see star trail.
Especially if it's really wide angle.
Yes. So
Thank you so much, Ron.
sure.
Thank you. All right, and last but not least, as usual, we have lots of passionate astronomers, so time is short. So think of this as a sneak preview of what our director here of the observatory can provide on a Friday. Jim, do you want to hand out your cheat sheets?
Oh, I can.
Yeah.
What we've got here, I made these up years ago.
Set that down. Let me take care of this first.
They're actually just cheat sheets with basic facts that we can look at that you can't keep in your mind, or I can't anymore. I look at it at home and we've got, what is it, 40 copies?
Yep.
You've got 40 copies here.
Should be plenty for everybody here.
If you want one, they're sitting up here, come take them. They're helpful when you're out there with people. They will ask you questions sometimes. And just makes things
Would it be okay if I just say,
easier.
All right, I know it's after 10, so for the sake of time, I will keep this really short. But I am going to steal some of Joe's and Jim's thunder here with some props as well and demos. But first, if you're doing a public outreach program and it's a cloudy night or something, but it's the kind of thing where you're committed to it and you still want to do something, if you can get access to a computer and a projector and a screen or something, there is ways to do a presentation to folks and just talk a little bit about some basic stuff like constellations and things like that. You don't need to be an expert. Don't try to memorize every fact under the sun or try to tell people everything under the sun about something. You know, I've in the past had volunteers that were very enthusiastic, and the enthusiasm is great, but quartering people and telling them, you know, down to how many rivets there are on the Saturn V rocket and stuff like that is not information generally people want. So kind of filter yourself a little bit. Most people, when they want to know about an object or something, they mainly just want to know how big it is, how far away it is, and sometimes how old it is, or, you know, just real basic stuff like that. They don't need to know, you know, the real esoteric stuff about an object and things of that nature. However, if you're doing, you know, I'm talking as far as at the telescope when you're showing people things and stuff like that. If you're doing the presentation, though, yeah, you can get a little bit more detail, and you should encourage people to ask questions because that can drive your presentation as well. It helps you kind of gauge your audience and as to the level they are, and you know how much detail you want to go into and things of that nature. So you can use their questions to kind of feel out your audience, and it's important to direct your messages to the audience. You know, you're not, in other words, you know, you're doing a public outreach program. You're not talking to astronerds like all of us necessarily. You're talking about people who are just curious, you know, or they're just looking for something to do on a Friday or Saturday night or something like that, and they thought it'd be real cool to do some stargazing. But again, you know, we can't control the weather, so in lieu of that, you know, unlike JGAP, which they can't do programs on cloudy nights, here at Perkins we can, And generally what I do is I do a talk, and I use something called a planetarium app, and that's what they call them these days, or planetarium software, that simulates a nighttime sky. And there are dozens of these that you can download and install on your various devices. Some of them are real cool. You can put on your smartphone, and they'll sync with your GPS cell phone. And again, kind of go a little bit against what was said earlier about using them at night is if it's a cloudy night, it doesn't hurt to load that software in your phone. And some of them are sophisticated enough when you point at an object or where an object should be in the sky and hold your phone up to it, it'll tell you what it is or where it is, even if it's cloudy, where to be in the sky and stuff like that. So you can even do a little impromptu planetarium show on your phone with a few folks around you in that regard. Also, in combination with a laser pointer. If it's not a great night or there's a full moon, again, you can do this. It's not too disruptive. But again, discouraged around telescopes if you're actually doing telescope observing. This is called Stellarium. It's free for PC and Mac, for laptops and computers, but you do weirdly have to pay for it to put on devices, like smartphones, pads, things like that, tablets. But it's not that expensive. And I like it because most of these there's no one piece of software that's good all around for everything, but this is one of the closest ones I've found to that. And in part because it simulates the night sky very well, simulates objects in the sky. And if you have an internet connection, it'll actually load images. You can connect to like the Digital Sky Survey, and it downloads real images taken with telescopes into the background when you're pointing at an object. And the basic version of it, which is often what I use for these talks, has some of those preloaded in it, so you don't even need to be connected to the internet. For example, we'll take a look up here in Lyra at the Ring Nebula. All of a sudden this thing decides it wants to freeze up. There we go. So there you can show, the Ring Nebula. And again, you could talk about what it is. It's the end of a star's life. It's what's going to happen to the sun when it dies on Tuesday in about 5 billion years. I got a 1 in 7 chance of being right. And again, and also mix up your talks a little bit. I throw in little jokes and things like that. Like when I talk about finding the North Star, and I say it's named Polaris after the mall down the road and stuff like that. It just gets little chuckles out of people like that, and it makes people enjoy your presentations a lot more. What you should do though is learn the software though. Work on it on your own. Manipulate it, adjust the settings. I like this one because a lot of the preset settings in it are good for doing these kind of presentations, so I don't have to mess around too much with it. I just have to turn on or off a few things. You can do things like turn off the constellation names and lines so you can actually see what the sky looks like, and there's a way you even turn off the star names, and so that way people can see. And you can, in the settings, there's a way you can do different sky lores from different cultures, Asian cultures and things like that. You can load those, it'll show those constellations, ancient Egyptian constellations, things like that. So it's very flexible as far as being able to do an astronomy presentation. Now the other thing I often do in combination with this when I do the talks is when I start throwing around numbers like how far away the moon is and things like that, it's real helpful not just to throw numbers at them, but to use props. And there are many little things that you can use. For example, to demonstrate how big the moon is compared to the Earth and its distance and things like that, there is, let's see, what happened to my Earth? There it is. I got this prop from NASA, but you can make this on your own if you get yourself a yardstick and a way to have a marble to represent the size of the Earth, and then something like a freeze-dried pea or something to represent the moon. That on those scales work. And as Jim mentioned, the moon is roughly about 30 inches away from the Earth, okay? And so this is one of the tools I use when I do like daytime programs and things like that, talk about, you know, the scale of things. And I'll point out things, you know, we'll throw a little esoteric fact in, you know, I'll say, let's play Trivial Pursuit 1969 edition. How long did it take the astronauts to get from the Earth to the moon? Anybody know? 3 or 4 days. To go from here to here, and I'll say, I'll simulate it for you. Sorry, we don't have that amount of time. I said it would be short. Yeah, just having just, and you don't, like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be the really cool exact things. Like I said, just a marble and a pea will do. And, you know, just tape it onto the ruler or something like that. It doesn't have to be so sophisticated. Another thing I'd like to talk a bit about is the scale in the solar system.